While investors await Friday's retail sales report for a temperature check on consumer spending, Rakuten, in collaboration with Vogue Business, has released survey data from 1,200 Vogue and GQ readers to gain an understanding of today's luxury buyers and how current economic conditions are shaping their behavior. Here to discuss is Rakuten Rewards President Kristen Gall. Kristen, thank you for joining me this morning. So, as we're taking a look at what's been happening with inflation, how are you seeing that showing up in Rakuten's data?
The interesting thing is, from a consumer spending perspective and from a spending perspective overall in retail, we've seen relatively positive momentum in the first part of this year, and that aligns with the data that we've seen coming out about consumer spending in the larger market. What this means is that people have jobs, they still have pandemic savings accounts, and inevitably what that means is that consumer spending will continue to remain relatively positive despite the fact that everyone is nervous about the economy. We're seeing that really render itself well in luxury. Now, remember, luxury overall for the last couple of years has been a freight train. And this continues to be something that as consumers decide how to spend, some of them are being a little bit more elevated about how they're spending their money, meaning they may be spending a little bit less on some of the things that don't matter to them, but they are still investing in luxury goods, which is why luxury is growing at the rate that it continues to.
Now, I was shocked looking at Gen Z's growth when it comes to luxury spending. Talk about the differences we're seeing generationally and why Gen Z, as we see here, their spending growing 3 times faster than other generations.
This was the craziest data of all to me as we were digesting this. So the thing about Gen Z is that they are starting to buy luxury significantly earlier than the generations before them. Gen Z starts buying luxury on average at 15 years old. If you look at Gen X and Gen Y, they purchased luxury at 22, 23, 25 was the first time that they sort of entered the luxury market. So Gen Z, because of how they've grown up digitally, they're very aware of luxury. They're also very aware of sustainability in purchasing, which means that they will buy fewer things, but they will buy better things. And for them, that may mean not buying 5 handbags, but buying 1 luxury handbag. And it's a very, very different mentality, both because they've been exposed to luxury from a very early age when previous generations weren't, but also they want to buy less, but buy better.
And I mean, they most of them, from what we can see from the study, have the luxury of still living at home, so don't have some of the costs the rest of us have with things like rents and mortgage. But they don't also seem to be rushing to change any of this. I mean, 15 years old seems incredibly young. How is that shaping how some of these advertisers are really approaching some of these buyers then?
I think from a luxury advertiser perspective, they're going to have to change how they reach people, where they reach people. It used to be that you would only be able to access luxury by going into a luxury store, either a department store or a boutique. Luxury brands during the pandemic moved online. They moved a little bit more to digital, but the access to luxury is going to be very important for these younger generations. The way that a lot of these younger generations started to work with luxury was resale and looking into sites like The RealReal and Tradesy and ThredUp. And what that allowed luxury brands to do is gain a lot of exposure with this audience. But what these luxury brands want is they want a conversation with that audience directly. It means that they're going to have to be in different digital channels. Chanel needs to be on TikTok. It's a very different paradigm from, I think, where they were 5 years ago even.
I mean, it really is. And I want to also talk about how people are funding their purchases, the growth of credit cards, buy now, pay later, and incentives. Where are you seeing the strongest growth in how some of these purchases are being funded?
The interesting thing that we saw, I assumed that all of this would be funded with credit and funded with buy now, pay later. But when we looked at our data, increasingly, it's really being funded with personal income. I think your point about how younger consumers are more often living at home. They have a lot of, discretionary income, especially Gen Z. So they're using this discretionary income to fund these purchases. But increasingly, it is about how do I save money and how do I sort of gain, money back from companies like Rakuten, which is how do I get cash back on the purchases that I make. And then also, they are using buy now, pay later. They are using credit, but not to the extent that we actually thought that they were.
And so as we look at the average unit price, when you do have a bigger pool of people coming into this luxury market, how is that changing pricing?
So our average order value has gone up, really consistently over the last few years at Rakuten because specifically the luxury vertical has been driving it. So what it means is that what we're seeing is that consumers are buying fewer units overall. So they are buying less frequently, but when they buy, they are spending more. This is a very conscious consumer pattern. It's really interesting that the average order value continues to be sort of what's driving the market. Partially that's inflation, right? We know that prices went up, and we know that in luxury in particular, price increases were a huge thing over the last few years as luxury really tried to level set how they build their brands and at what price point they want to play. But there is this shift in average order value overall that really points to the fact that people are being very conscious about how they're spending their money and how many times they're purchasing.
So the more conscious consumer, an interesting trend to watch. Great stuff there. Rakuten Rewards President Kristen Gall, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.